Hey guys, this is Logic Crazy and I'm Jonathan, and welcome to yet another chess engine tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to learn how to import FEN strings. So instead of initiating a standard chess position, we're going to import a FEN string, which is a special notation which depicts all the properties of a chess position. It's castling rights, it's en passant rights, whose turn it is, and where all the pieces are, as well as a few extra features. So what I've done is I've created this method again in board generation, in the board generation class. And so we have already created initiate standard chess and initiate chess 960, and there's all these other methods we have here. But I added this method called import FEN. And so what we'll send it is, as I have in the user interface right now, is import FEN, and it will retrieve just a string of the FEN string. Now you can look this up online to see exactly how this string works, but here's basically how it goes. The first few, everything till the first space represents all the pieces that get positioned on the board. And a lowercase r and an n and a b would be rook, knight, bishop, all black. Everything that's capital is a white piece, and every slash represents a new line. So this goes, this would be rank 8, and then rank 7, and 6, and 5, and 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. And what we do is every time there's a space, we put a number, such as 8 would represent an entire blank line. But if we were to, instead of these two pawns, let's say they were empty, we would put a little 2 there. So it would be pawn, 2 empty spaces, followed by 5 pawns. And it's really a simple notation. Then there's a space followed by a W, a lowercase w or a lowercase b. W standing for white's turn to move, B standing for black's turn to move. Followed by that, there's a space, and then there are up to 4 characters here. These represent castling rights. So capital K would mean white kingside can castle. Capital Q would mean white queenside can castle. And lowercase represents the castling rights of the black side. So if any of these are omitted, then the board cannot castle. So for instance, if I took out this lowercase k, now black cannot castle kingside. If there are no castling allowed, this will be replaced with a dash, like so. And the next one represents, it's a dash right now, but it represents the en passant properties, and it's basically just a number between 1 and 8, representing the file of the piece of the en passant file, where that double pawn push occurred. And then 0 and 1 are things that we don't really need to worry about at this stage in the game. So let's go to this method and see how I implemented it. I should say that it is not chess 960 compatible because the rules are a little different, and you need extra rules for castling in the FEN string. But here's how I have the code. First, we set all our user interface pieces to 0, and all our castling rights are disabled. And then we have 2 indexes here, integers. One is the char index. This will represent the location that we were looking at our FEN string at. So we'll start at the left side of the FEN string at character 0, and then 1, 2, and 3, and we'll keep scanning through it. And then our board index will indicate where we are on the 64 bits of the board. So when we read this, let's go back to our previous example where we had a 2 here. It'll place a pawn here. Then when it reads this 2, it'll move 2 spaces over on the board to place that next P 2 spots over, sort of thing. So what we do is we just do a big switch thing based on what the character is at char index, and always plus plus. So adding 1 each round, we do this switch thing. And we do this while the FEN string is not a space, because we really don't know how many characters there'll be in total. Because if I were to place these 3 pawns, let's say with a 3, all of a sudden now our FEN string is longer or shorter. So we just go through, if it's a capital P, add a piece at that white pawn at the location of the board index, and increase the board index to the next spot. If it's a slash, don't do anything. It just means new line, so we disregard that. If it's a 1, increase the board index by 1. If it's a 2, increase it by 2, and so on. This simulates spaces and such between the pieces, gaps where there are empty squares on our chessboard. Then we set our white to move based on the FEN string at the next char index. If it equals 1, or a W I should say, then white to move is true. Otherwise, white to move will become false if it's a black. Then we char index plus equals 2. This is basically going to our, sort of putting our cursor, if you will, to the castling rights. And we again do a switch thing till there's a space found. And if it's capital K, then the user interface castle white king is true, and all the others follow the same pattern. And then at the very last thing we do, we say if the FEN string char at is not a dash, then we set it to be whatever the file is. And I should say that it wasn't a number between 1 and 8. It's actually, since it's a file, it's a letter between A and H. And to convert that into a number, what I do is I take the character, let's say it was an A, and I subtract it by the character A. That would give me a 0. If it was, let's say, a C, it's 2 greater than an A, so it would give me 2. And so on and so forth. So that's really all there is to importing a FEN. One thing we could try here is just to test this out. We have our starting location that we import. Let's run it and see if our board looks like a starting position, and it does. Now, if I were to go back to our perfdata.txt file and copy this second position that I have for our perf testing and paste it in there, you won't maybe want to, you might not know exactly what this is going to look like, but when we run it, you can see that it looks like a valid position. And if you look, we start off with a rook, 3 spaces, a king, 2 spaces, and a rook. And you can see there's a rook followed by 3 spaces, followed by a king, followed by 2 spaces, followed by a rook. On the next line, it's a pawn, space, pawn, pawn, queen, bishop, pawn, bishop, space, and so on and so forth all the way through. And we can trust that our castling features, if we just hover over them, hopefully they are all, can't tell right now, but they should all be set up correctly as well as our Inpusant values. All right, until next time, enjoy Java.